A journey around the north coast of Europe.
Dr. Sydney Soclof. 2020. Dr. Sydney at earthlink.net.
Narration by Dr. Sydney Soclof.
Sally Phonemes.
And Nathan Phonemes. Normandy.
Normandy is spelled in French as Normandy.
Normandy is an historic and cultural region in northern France.
Normandy is directly across from England, bordering the English Channel. Or as the French call it, La Manche, which translates to the sleeve.
Here is Normandy in the English Channel, or La Manche.
The Channel Islands are British, but are also culturally and historically part of the Duchy of Normandy.
Le Havre is the second largest city in Normandy after Rouen, and is almost directly south of Southampton, England.
It is 120 miles, or 193 kilometers across the English Channel from Southampton in England to Le Havre in Normandy.
It is then 110 miles, or 177 kilometers, from Le Havre to Paris.
The principal river through Normandy is the Seine. The Seine flows through Paris and then meanders into Normandy. The two largest cities in Normandy are on the Seine: Rouen and Le Havre. More exactly, Le Havre is on the Seine estuary or Baie de la Seine.
Normandy was formerly a province of France, but in 1791 was divided into the departments shown here of Manche, Calvados, Orne, Eure, and Seine-Maritime.
Normandy is divided by the Seine River into Haute Normandy or Upper Normandy and Basse Normandy or Lower Normandy. Rouen is considered to be the capital, or chief city of Haute Normandy, and Caen is considered to be the capital, or chief city of Basse Normandy.
The largest cities of Normandy are Le Havre, Rouen, Caen, Cherbourg, and Dieppe.
Here are the area population numbers for the largest cities in Normandy. The total population of Normandy is 3.2 million.
Normandy is a region of flat grasslands and farmlands interrupted by gentle hills, and the hedgerows that commonly serve to demarcate fields.
The hedgerows in Normandy were a major and somewhat unexpected problem following the Allied invasion in June 1944. The hedgerows were used to create small pastures and farm fields, many of them just a few acres in size, in a land without rocks or trees. These hedgerows were the fences that kept cattle from wandering off, and allowed farmers to clearly identify what land they owned.
The Normandy hedgerows were made up of linear mounds or walls of earth topped by a thick tangle of trees and brush averaging 4 feet high. Most of the hedgerows dated back hundreds of years, some back to the time of William the Conqueror. Centuries of soil compaction and vegetation growth meant the hedgerows were dense, sturdy obstacles that were virtually impossible to penetrate.
On a flat and otherwise featureless coastal plain, the hedgerows created divided terrain with limited lines of sight, and restricted virtually all off-road movement.
The hedgerows severely limited the mobility of Allied infantry and tanks during the fighting in Normandy, and provided defensive cover for the German defenders.
The hedgerow problem for the movement of tanks was only partially solved by the development of Allied tanks fitted with hedgerow cutting devices, or tusks. The tanks were nicknamed the Rhino, or rhinoceros.
Normandy is relatively flat in the northern coastal regions and somewhat hilly in the south.
The Vikings or Norsemen, who invaded and then settled in northern France, or the Frankish kingdom, are called the Normans, and the region they settled became known as Normandy.
The Normans founded the Duchy of Normandy in northern France. The Norman leader was Rollo.
Rollo's Christianized successors to the Dukedom of Normandy acquired neighboring territories in a series of wars, becoming so powerful that the control they exercised over their domains was practically independent of the French crown.
Within a generation, the Vikings, or Normans, as they came to be known, had extended their rule westward, covering an area that became known as Normandy.
The Baltic States.
The Baltic States are the three small countries of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania in northeastern Europe, on the eastern shore of the Baltic Sea.
These three countries have a long, interesting history and an impressive cultural heritage, dating back to the Hanseatic League. These Baltic countries are home to 6.3 million people, nearly half of them in Lithuania.
The three capitals, Tallinn in Estonia, Riga in Latvia, and Vilnius in Lithuania, all have UNESCO-listed old towns, Soviet concrete new towns, and occasional 21st century buildings in between.
Tallinn, in Estonia, is smallest of the three, but still an aspiring global-type city, and Estonia's digital industrial hub.
Estonia is the most Nordic of the three Baltic countries, with linguistic connections to Finland.
Latvia is a predominantly Protestant country, with a lot of Baltic German and Nordic heritage. Riga in Latvia is the region's biggest city.
Lithuania has an expanding economic market, and some of the best natural countryside in Europe. Vilnius is the cosmopolitan center and capital city.
Baltic states are diverse, and each country and region have a different history and culture. While Latvia and Estonia were under foreign dominance for centuries, Lithuania was one of major powers in the region.
The culture of Baltic states was strongly influenced by Scandinavians, Germans, Poles, and Russians. The modern history of the Baltic states has been especially shaped by Russia, since it gained control over the area during the 18th century.
People of the Baltic states have strong national identities, and are today well integrated with the Western world.
Scandinavia and northern Germany are largely Protestant, and Poland is very much Roman Catholic.
Traditional Christian affiliations were Lutheranism in much of Latvia and Estonia, and Catholicism in eastern Latvia and Lithuania.
Communism and the general loss of religion across the Western world have heavily altered the traditional affiliations. Once a Lutheran country, Estonia is now among the least religious countries in the world.
Languages. Each of the three Baltic states have their own language, with Russian as a common second, or even first, language of many, particularly in the cities.
English is widely spoken, especially among younger people and academics, and those born after the fall of the Soviet Union tend to be fluent, especially in Estonia. German is often understood and spoken at a conversational level. Any attempt to speak the native language is greatly appreciated. The Baltic states have had vibrant histories. Christianity, Germans, and feudalism arrived together in the 13th century. Also, in the 13th century, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania emerged as a major political player in medieval Europe. The Hanseatic League dominated commerce on the Baltic, until Denmark and later Sweden came to rule the sea.
While being a major route for navigation, the Baltic Sea also provides amber, especially from its southern shores. The bordering countries have traditionally provided lumber, wood tar, flax, hemp, and furs.
Sweden had from early medieval times a flourishing mining industry, especially in iron ore and silver. Poland had, and still has, extensive salt mines. All this has provided for rich trading since the Roman times.
The Baltic region as well as the Baltic states of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia have had a long and complex history of subjugation and independence.
After centuries of foreign domination, the Baltic countries re-emerged as independent nations in the period after World War I, from 1918 to 1920. After only 20 years of independence, the Baltic states were occupied by the Soviet Union from 1940 to 1991.
Powers that controlled the Baltic states at various times included Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Poland, and Russia.
In the early Middle Ages, the Vikings of Scandinavia built their trade emporia all around the Baltic.
Later, there were fights for control over the sea with Windish tribes dwelling on the southern shore of the Baltic.
The Vikings also used the rivers of Russia for trade routes, finding their way eventually to the Black Sea and southern Russia.
Starting in the 11th century, the southern and eastern shores of the Baltic were settled by Germans in the course of the Ostsiedlung, or East settling, and to a lesser extent by Dutch, Danes, and Scots.
During the Migration Age, Slavic tribes already moved further west. But by the end of the early Middle Ages this migration had stopped.
This shows the Slavic tribes in the 7th to 9th centuries.
The Ostsiedlung, or East settling, the German eastward expansion, was the medieval eastward migration and settlement of Germanic-speaking peoples from the Holy Roman Empire into less populated regions of Central Europe, parts of West-Eastern Europe, and the Baltics.
The Ostsiedlung roughly stretched from Estonia in the north all the way to Slovenia in the south and extended into Transylvania, modern-day Romania, in the east.
Denmark gradually gained control over most of the Baltic coast, until she lost much of her possessions after being defeated in the 1227 Battle of Bornhoved.
The Northern Crusades or Baltic Crusades were military campaigns organized by popes and Western rulers to convert pagans to Christianity in the 12th to 15th century.
Unlike in the Holy Land, where military campaigns were aimed at liberating former Christian lands from Muslim rule, the Crusades in the Baltic region were aimed at converting the local pagan population.
Up to the 11th century, much of the Baltic region continued to be pagan. So, this area was another place for crusades. Besides the campaigns to capture Jerusalem and other Middle East cities from Muslim control from the late 11th century onwards.
As with the Crusades in the Muslim areas of the Middle East, rulers seized the opportunity to combine the religious benefits of crusading, of remission of sins, with territorial expansion and material wealth in the form of land, furs, amber, and slaves.
The official starting point for the Northern Crusades was the call by Pope Celestine III in 1195. However, the Catholic kingdoms of Scandinavia, Poland, and the Holy Roman Empire had begun moving to subjugate their pagan neighbors even earlier.
The Crusades took place mostly in the 12th and 13th centuries, and resulted in the mass extermination subjugation and forced baptism of Baltic, Finnic and West Slavic peoples around the southern and eastern shores of the Baltic Sea, and to a lesser extent also against Orthodox Christian Slavs, East Slavs.
Lands next to the Baltic Sea's eastern shore were among the last in Europe to be converted to Christianity in the Northern Crusades, Finland in the 12th century by the Swedes, and what are now Estonia and Latvia in the early 13th century by the Danes and the Germans.
The Teutonic Order was originally formed to aid Christians on their pilgrimages to the Holy Land and to establish hospitals. Its members have commonly been known as the Teutonic Knights, with the small voluntary and mercenary military membership.
The Teutonic Knights served as a crusading military order for protection of Christians in the Holy Land and the Baltics during the Middle Ages.
The Teutonic Knights gained control over parts of the southern and eastern shore of the Baltic Sea, where they set up a monastic state while fighting the Poles, the Danes, the Swedes, the Russians of ancient Novgorod, and the Lithuanians, who were the last Europeans to convert to Christianity.
This map shows the Baltic tribes around the year 1200. Note the Germanic Prussians east of the Vistula River.
The Germanic Teutonic Order invaded and subjugated much of the Baltic region in the 13th century.
This map shows the area controlled by the Teutonic Order in 1260.
This shows the extent of the Teutonic Order in 1300.
Map of Teutonic Knights in year 1400.
This is a map of the Teutonic state in 1410. Note that it encompassed most of the present-day Baltic states of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia as well as the Baltic coastal region of Poland. Long before the present European Union, there was a much earlier form of a European common market called the Hanseatic League.
In the 13th to 17th centuries, the strongest economic force in Northern Europe became the Hanseatic League, which used the Baltic Sea to establish trade routes between its member cities.
The Hanseatic League was a commercial and defensive confederation of merchant guilds and market towns in northwestern and central Europe. It existed from the 1200s to 1600s.
At its peak, the Hanseatic League flourished in 16 countries and 190 cities, even extending as far as Reykjavik in Iceland.
The Baltic Sea is no longer the major highway of trade that it was in the Middle Ages, when it flourished as the main means of communication between the ports of the Hanseatic League, including Lübeck, Rostock, Visby, and Gdańsk.
The German Hanse merchants traded mainly in fish, softwood timber for shipbuilding, hemp for ropes, flax for sailcloth, and grain. Forest products included honey and furs, tar and amber.
Hansa, later spelled as Hansa, was the Middle Low German word for a convoy, and this word was applied to bands of merchants traveling between the Hanseatic cities, whether by land or by sea.
The Hanseatic League began in 1241, with the first formal alliance between Lübeck and Hamburg, and then eventually dominated Baltic maritime trade for 3 centuries along the coast of northern Europe.
The Hanseatic League dominated maritime trade along the coast of northern Europe, from the Baltic to the North Sea from the 13th to the 17th centuries. It began a slow decline after 1450.
This shows the main trading routes of the Hanseatic League, extending from London in the west to Novgorod in Russia in the east.
Overfishing of herring. The opening up of trade to the Americas and the Caribbean following the European Age of Discovery, mid-15th to mid-16th century, and the increase in the size of sailing ships led to the decline of the Hanseatic League.
The legacy of the Hansa is remembered today in several names. For example, the German airline Lufthansa or Air Hansa. There are a number of Hanseatic League buildings still in existence, as well as museums.
This is a view of the Krantor, or Crane Gate, in the old and rich port city in Poland of Gdańsk, formerly called Danzig.
This is drawing of the Oysters House, a kontor, or foreign trading post of the Hanseatic League. In Antwerp,
the Hanseatic Warehouse in King's Lynn is the only surviving Hanseatic League building in England.
Vagen is Norwegian for the dock. It is a series of Hanseatic heritage commercial buildings in the harbor of Bergen, Norway.
Around 1350, a kontor of the Hanseatic League was established here, and became the center of the Hanseatic commercial activities in Norway. Today, Vagen houses museums, shops, restaurants and pubs, and has been on the UNESCO list for World Cultural Heritage Sites since 1979.
There are 2 museums in Europe dedicated specifically to the history of the Hanseatic League, the European Hansa Museum in Lübeck and the Hanseatic Museum in Scottstuen and Bergen. The European Hansa Museum is the largest museum in the world dedicated to the history of the Hanseatic League. It opened in 2015. The European Hansa Museum in Lübeck retraces the activities of medieval merchants and seafarers of the Hanseatic League.
This is the Scottstuen, the Hanseatic Museum in Bergen, Norway.
The Protestant Reformation, begun in 1517 by Martin Luther, resulted in a major change in the religious map of Europe, especially in the divide between North and South.
This shows the principal religions in Europe in the present day. Note that the Mediterranean region is primarily Roman Catholic and Islamic to the south and east. The Baltic and North Sea regions of Northern Europe are predominantly Protestant.
Russia, Prussia, Poland, and Lithuania have contended for power in the Baltic Sea region from the 16th century to the present day.
In the 16th and early 17th centuries, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Denmark, and Sweden fought wars for dominion. Eventually, it was the Swedish Empire that virtually encompassed the Baltic Sea, and called it Mare Nostrum Balticum, or Baltic Sea.
In the Middle Ages, Lithuania was one of the biggest countries in Europe, reaching from the Baltic to almost the Black Sea. It included the area that is now Belarus, and much of Ukraine.
In 1569, Lithuania joined in union with Poland, becoming part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. This later included Latvia and part of Estonia.
Here are the Swedish possessions in the Baltic area in 1700. We see that Sweden blocked Russia's access to the Baltic Sea.
The Great Northern War, ending with Sweden's defeat, brought Russia to the eastern coast of the Baltic.
Russia's Peter the Great saw the strategic importance of the Baltic and decided to found his new capital, St. Petersburg, in 1703 in the Nevar River Delta at the east end of the Gulf of Finland.
Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania became Russian possessions under Tsar Peter the Great in 1710. They remained so until 1918. Trading developed not just within the Baltic region, but also with the North Sea region, especially eastern England and the Netherlands.
This is Prussia, and later the German Empire after 1871. Note that the Prussian regions of Pomerania, West Prussia, and East Prussia occupy much of the Baltic region.
After the unification of Germany in 1871, much of the southern Baltic coast became part of the German Empire.
This is Central and Eastern Europe in 1900, showing the extent of the three empires that partitioned the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth.
Note that the German and Russian empires together occupied the entire southern Baltic region that is now Poland, and the three Baltic states of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia.
In 1809, Finland was incorporated into the Russian Empire as the autonomous Grand Duchy of Finland. It existed between 1809 and 1917 as an autonomous part of the Russian Empire.
The First World War was partly fought in the Baltic Sea. After 1920, Poland was connected to the Baltic Sea by the Polish corridor, and enlarged the port of Gdynia in rivalry with the port of the Free City of Danzig, now Gdańsk.
In 1918, the three Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, together with Finland became independent republics. In 1940, the three Baltic states were annexed by the USSR.
As a result, ethnic Russians make up a substantial part of the population of the Baltic states. For example, Russian speakers are 24% of the population of present-day Estonia, with a high concentration living in Tallinn.
Poland, which had been partitioned between Germany, Austria, and Russia, was reconstituted after the conclusion of World War I, and the Treaty of Versailles in 1919.
Territories from the defeated Germany were transferred to France and Poland. This included areas in West Prussia known as the Polish Corridor or Danzig Corridor, which gave Poland access to the Baltic Sea.
In order to give Poland access to the Baltic Sea, this strip of land, 20 to 70 miles wide, called the Polish Corridor, was given to Poland. This corridor lay along the lower course of the Vistula River, and consisted of West Prussia and most of the province of Posen, or Poznan.
The territory of the Polish corridor was historically Polish, and before the partitions of Poland in the late 18th century was inhabited by a Polish majority.
Between the Polish corridor and the German region of East Prussia was the Free City of Danzig, or in Polish, Gdańsk.
The city of Danzig, which had been a German city in East Prussia, became a free city administered by the League of Nations.
The Free City of Danzig was a semi-autonomous city-state that existed between 1920 and 1939, consisting of the Baltic seaport of Danzig, now Gdańsk, and nearly 200 towns and villages in the surrounding areas. The Free City of Danzig was created in 1920 by the Treaty of Versailles after the end of World War I.
The Free City of Danzig was created in order to give Poland access to a large seaport. The Free City's population of 410,000 was 98% German, and only 1% Polish.
Poland built the corridor port of Gdynia just 10 miles to the north as an alternative to Danzig. The building of this new port starting in 1921, and by 1933, the commerce passing through Gdynia exceeded that of Danzig.
During the Second World War, Nazi Germany conquered all of the southern shore and much of the eastern by occupying Poland and the Baltic states.
In the frigid waters of January 1945, the Baltic Sea became a mass grave for drowned people on torpedoed refugee ships. The sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff remains the worst maritime disaster in history, killing an estimated 6,000 people. mostly women and children, and about 1,200 wounded German soldiers.
The Polish, or Danzig corridor, was the issue, or at least the apparent pretext, over which World War II began.
In March 1939, the Nazi dictator of Germany, Adolf Hitler, demanded the cession of Danzig, and the creation of extraterritorial German highways across the corridor connecting Germany to East Prussia.
Poland refused these demands and secured French and British guarantees against German aggression in September. Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, thus beginning World War II.
Westerplatte is where World War II broke out on September 1, 1939. Westerplatte is at the entrance to the harbor, and just a few miles from the city of Gdańsk. The Polish garrison held out against the attack for 7 days before surrendering to the Nazi German forces.
The site is now a memorial to the defenders, including a small museum, some of the ruins left from the shelling, and a massive monument that towers above the area.
The German battleship Schleswig-Holstein fired at the Polish outpost Westerplatte in the Free City of Danzig. On September 1, 1939, this attack on Westerplatte became the start of World War II.
Hitler annexed the Polish corridor, Danzig, Posen, in districts along the Silesian frontier, and placed the rest of the conquered Polish territory under a German governor.
At the beginning of World War II in 1939, the Baltic Germans were forced by the German government to leave and be resettled in German-controlled areas to the west.
1939 and 1940, the Winter War. The Soviet Union attacked Finland.
1941 to 1944, the Continuation War. Finland fought the Soviet Union after Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941.
In 1940, with the outbreak of World War II, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia are forcibly incorporated into the USSR as the Lithuanian Soviet Socialist Republic, Latvian Soviet Socialist Republic, and Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic.
Germany invaded the USSR during World War II in June 1941. The three Baltic states were forcibly occupied by Nazi Germany.
The end of the Second World War saw major changes in the Baltic region.
This is Europe after the end of World War II, and during the Cold War period of 1945 to 1991.
After 1945, the German population was expelled from all areas east of the Oder-Neisse line, making room for Polish and Russian settlers.
Poland gained a vast stretch of the southern shore, and Russia gained another access to the Baltic with the Kaliningrad Oblast. The Baltic states on the eastern shore were again incorporated in the Soviet Union. Poland and East Germany became communist states.
Danzig, later to be renamed Gdańsk, was greatly damaged during World War II. Gdańsk was returned to Poland in March 1945. Gdańsk, along with other territories in the Polish corridor in East Prussia, became part of post-war Poland.
The communist regimes in Eastern and Central Europe collapsed in the late 1980s. Since May 2004, the Baltic Sea has been almost entirely surrounded by countries of the European Union. The only remaining non-EU areas are the Russian metropolis of St. Petersburg and the Kaliningrad Oblast exclave.
With the collapse of the Soviet Union, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia regained their freedom in 1994. The last Russian troops left, and the Baltic states became free to promote economic and political ties with Western Europe.
In 2004, the Baltic states of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia joined both NATO and the European Union. Finland had become part of the European Union in 1995. Tallinn suffered greatly over the years. In 1433 from fire, from the plague in 1532, and being attacked by the Danes from 1569 to 1570.
In 1577, Tallinn was attacked by the Russians, and in 1710, the Tsar Peter the Great of Russia captured Tallinn. Tallinn then remained the Russian possession for the next 200 years, until 1918.
Estonia finally attained independence after World War I in 1918. After centuries of Danish, Swedish, German, and Russian rule, with Tallinn as the capital.
With independence in 1918, the name Tallinn became official, replacing the previous name of Revel.
In 1940, with the outbreak of World War II, Estonia was forcibly incorporated into the USSR as the Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic.
Estonia was forcibly occupied by Nazi Germany after the invasion of the USSR during World War II in 1941.
The Baltic Germans were ethnically German inhabitants of the Baltic countries of Estonia and Latvia. Although they never made up more than 10% of the total population, they were the social, commercial, political, and cultural elite in that region for over 700 years until the independence of those countries in 1918.
At the beginning of World War II in 1939, the Baltic Germans were forced by the German government to leave and be resettled in German-controlled areas to the west.
Estonia was reoccupied by the Soviet Union in 1944. Many Russians came to live in Tallinn, while many Estonians fled to the countryside, or were exiled by the Soviets.
As a result, ethnic Russians make up 24% of the population of present-day Estonia, with a high concentration living in Tallinn.
With the collapse of the Soviet Union, Estonia regained its freedom in 1991. The last Russian troops left in 1994. Estonia then became free to promote economic and political ties with Western Europe.
In 2004, Estonia joined both NATO and the European Union.
In 1918, Lithuania became an independent republic. In 1940, Lithuania was annexed by the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR.
After World War II ended in 1945, Lithuania remained part of the Soviet Union and was controlled by the Lithuanian Communist Party, politically and economically for more than 4 decades. Lithuania was later the first Soviet republic to declare its independence again as an independent nation in 1990. When the USSR collapsed in 1991, Lithuania regained its independence.
After independence, Lithuania worked to convert its economy from a centrally controlled socialist model to a free market system. In the early years of the 21st century, Lithuania emerged as a forward-looking country, joining both the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and the European Union, EU, in 2004.
Beginning in the 13th century, Latvia was successively dominated by Germany, Poland, In Russia in 1918, Latvia became an independent country, as did Estonia and Lithuania. The three countries became known as the Baltic States.
In 1940, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, forcibly annexed the Baltic states.
Latvia regained its independence in 1991 and reinstated a parliamentary democracy. The country transformed its economy as well, rapidly dismantling the centralized system of the Soviet period in favor of a Western-style, free market economy.
Latvia's success in implementing these reforms helped it gain full membership in the European Union, EU, in 2004. The history of the Baltic region.
Gdańsk was first mentioned as a Polish city in 997 or 999. It was granted municipal autonomy in 1260 and developed as a trade center.
Danzig, and later Gdańsk, was one of the richest members of the Hanseatic League.
King Casimir IV of Poland regained the territory around Gdańsk in 1466, after a 13-year war. Gdańsk is granted local autonomy by the king in gratitude for its loyalty. It expands greatly, reaching its peak during the Renaissance as the most prosperous port on the Baltic.
Gdańsk shipyards launched their first warship in 1572. Gdańsk had 77,000 people by 1754. More than any other city in Eastern Europe.
Gdańsk was seized by the German Kingdom of Prussia in 1772, resulting in a rapid dissolution of port trade in 1793. Gdańsk was incorporated as part of Prussia, under the German name of Danzig. One interesting resource of the Baltic region is amber. Amber is fossilized tree resin. It has been appreciated and valued for its color and natural beauty since antiquity to the present as a gemstone. Amber is made into a variety of decorative objects and in jewelry.
The Baltic region is home to the largest known deposit of amber, called Baltic Amber or Saxonite. It dates from 44 million years ago, during the Eocene epoch.
It has been estimated that these forests created more than 100,000 tons of amber. Today, more than 90% of the world's amber comes from Kaliningrad Oblast of Russia.
Because it originates as a soft, sticky tree resin, amber sometimes contains animal and plant material as inclusions.
The Amber Road was an ancient trade route for the transfer of amber from coastal areas of the North Sea in the Baltic Sea to Venice in the Mediterranean Sea.
Amber was an important commodity, sometimes called the gold of the North. Amber was transported from the Baltic Sea coasts overland by way of the Vistula and Dnieper rivers to Italy, Greece, the Black Sea, Syria and Egypt for thousands of years.
This is beach sand on the Baltic Sea where amber is often washed up.
Amber is globally distributed, mainly in rocks of Cretaceous age or younger. Historically, the Samland coast west of Königsberg in Prussia was the world's leading source of amber.
The first mention of amber deposits here date back to the 12th century. About 90% of the world's extractable amber is still located in this area, which became the Kaliningrad Oblast of Russia in 1946.
This is the open-cast amber mine in Kaliningrad Oblast, Russia.
Although the Baltic is far from being the busiest area for maritime traffic, it does hold the record for the two worst maritime disasters in history, in terms of the loss of life. These two disasters occurred near the end of World War II as part of Operation Hannibal.
Operation Hannibal was a German naval operation involving the evacuation by sea of German troops and civilians from Kurland, East Prussia, and the Polish corridor from mid-January to May 1945. As the Red Army advanced into the Baltic regions and East Prussia,
the flood of military personnel and German civilians eventually turned the operation into one of the largest evacuations by sea in history.
Over a period of 15 weeks, somewhere between 494 and 1,080 merchant vessels of all types, including fishing boats and other craft, carried between 800,000 and 900,000 German civilians and 350,000 soldiers across the Baltic Sea to Germany and German-occupied Denmark.
This was more than 3 times the number of people evacuated in the 9-day operation of Dunkirk.
The worst maritime disaster in history, in terms of the loss of life, was that of the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff. The Wilhelm Gustloff sank in January 1945 in the Baltic Sea due to 3 torpedoes fired by a Soviet submarine. This resulted in the death of more than 7,000 people.
The Wilhelm Gustloff was used to evacuate thousands of German refugees in the Baltic regions that were being cut off by the rapid advance of the Red Army near the end of World War II.
The Wilhelm Gustloff was designed to carry 1,800 passengers and crew, but was carrying more than 10,000 people at the time of the attack.
This was the single greatest casualty toll of any maritime disaster. The ship drowned within 70 minutes after being struck by the first torpedo. The icy waters in the cold Baltic Sea ensured that very few escaped.
The Wilhelm Gustloff was originally constructed as a cruise ship by the Blohm and Voss shipyards in 1937. It was requisitioned by the German Navy in 1939. It served as a hospital ship until late 1940, and was later used as an accommodation and transport ship until it sank in 1945.
The MV Goya was a transport ship sunk in the Baltic Sea, resulting in the death of 6,700 people, making it one of the worst maritime disasters in history. The 5,230-ton Goya was constructed in 1940, and was used as a transport ship by Germany during World War II.
The MV Goya was used to evacuate German troops and refugees fleeing the Red Army in 1945. It was sailing from Danzig Bay to Stettin in the Baltic Sea when attacked by a Soviet submarine on April 16, 1945, less than 1 month before the surrender of Germany on May 8.
The MV Goya was designed to carry 1,800 passengers and crew, but was carrying more than 10,000 people at the time of the attack.
Another major disaster in more recent times in the Baltic was the loss of the MV Estonia, a cruise ferry with the loss of 852 lives in 1994. This was the second deadliest peacetime loss of a European ship, after the RMS Titanic, and the deadliest peacetime shipwreck to have occurred in European waters.
Recommended videos.
Recommended video, Hanseatic League, 5 minutes. 43 seconds.
Recommended video, a Dutch city in Poland, 2 minutes. 29 seconds.
Recommended video, what is Baltic Amber? 1 minute. 53 seconds.
Recommended video, how powerful are the Baltic States? 3 minutes. 4 seconds.
Recommended video, the rise and fall of the Balts, Estonians, Latvians and Lithuanians, 11 minutes. 30 seconds.
Recommended video, What were the Northern Crusades? 5 minutes. 43 seconds.
Recommended video, The Northern Crusades Podcast, 51 minutes. 22 seconds.
I'm always available to answer your questions at trasydney@earthlink.net.
The end.